Hello, I'm Ads, and today I'll be showing you how I paint my Tyranid Termagants in the High Fleet Leviathan colour scheme. So to start, you'll notice that I've left the arms off the Termagant. In the past I've struggled getting a brush around the arms when they're on the body, and there's not much in the way of problems in leaving them off. Feel free to push them on if you're speed painting yours, this is just how I like to do them. I then follow Juan Hidalgo's steps for the lighter flesh tones from his Leviathan Termagant video, which I'll drop a link to below. To walk you through it from my less skilled perspective though, everything gets a spray with Wraithbone Spray Primer, which is far more preferential than brushing on a cream colour by hand. I give the mini a quick coat of Wraithbone to even out any blotchy spots from the spray, then give the skin an all-over wash with a 1 to 2 mix of Makos Purple Contrast Paint and Contrast Medium, not letting it pull too heavily but allowing some good saturation of the paint into the recesses. The skin's then given a relayer with a very well thinned Screaming Skull, pulling paint from the purple recesses to let a gradient build across the skin and give it a pinky tone. I then highlight the skin with Pallid Witch Flesh. The flesh under the cream skin I paint with a pinker, fleshier tone. So to start that off, I paint on a layer of Volupus Pink mixed 2 to 1 with Contrast Medium. Again, don't let it pool too heavily, but really let it sink into those recesses, especially on the splits in the skin. Be careful with your brush placement here, if you overspill you'll want to touch back up with previous colours. When it's dry, I'll give those areas a quick highlight with Kislev Flesh, and a little dot of Pallid Witch Flesh to make it look a little bit shiny. At this point I'm focused on painting anything that'll be hard to reach with the weapon on, so I block the claws, hoofs and the chitin on the chest and legs in with black at this point. Any black is fine. I use 2 Thin Coat's Doom Death Black here because it's very good, but any is fine. I apply a glaze of corn red towards the end of the claws and hooves to sell them more as dark red. This is optional, you could very carefully dry brush the colour on instead and touch up the skin for any overspill, or you could just skip it entirely. They're then highlighted with Evil Sun Scarlet, Wild Rider Red and Fire Dragon Bright. The claws are just edge highlights plus a centre line down each scythe, applying the colour in smaller and smaller areas each time. The hooves have a striation pattern drawn onto them, which I'll go over more in depth on the Carapace later. The main idea is to get the brighter reds on there however you can though. I do striations just to mix up the textures on the mini, you could continue dry brushing or just layer it on, it's up to you. In haste to get going on recording for the video, I opted to attach the mini to the base at this point. This however made painting the next couple details challenging. If you're not too bothered, carry on as I am, otherwise paint the next parts and then add them to your base, that's my bad. The little chitin on the chest and legs are painted with the same colours as the Carapace, which I'll detail more thoroughly when it's time to do that. For now, know that I glazed Nagaroth Knight onto the leg plates, and highlighted both the chest and leg plates with Xerius Purple and Genestealer Purple, and a last point highlight of Slanesh Grey on the leg plates. The chest is just a couple quick edge highlights, the legs however are done with the same striation patterns you see on Tyranids. Again, we'll come to this in a minute. With those done, I work on the weapons. My Termagants here have flesh borers, but any of the weapon options work with this scheme. I'll show you at the end of the video. I start by painting in any fleshy areas with the same colours I did on the body. Volupus Pink and Contrast Medium mixed 2:1, Kislev Flesh and Pallid Witch Flesh. With the flesh borers, it's just the splits in the skin, maybe the muzzle if you want it to look like that, but on other weapons like Devourers you might have to have more areas you want to pick out. With that done, I carefully block in the weapon body with Corn Red, washing it back with Nuln Oil when it's dry. I then relayered with Corn Red and highlighted with Evil Sun Scarlet, Wild Rider Red and Fire Dragon Bright. The last detail before moving on is the big open spot on the side of the gun. These are painted up as an eye more often than not, so I'll use the same colours I plan to use on the Termagant too. I start by basing the whole thing with Avalanche Sunset, before washing Druchii Violet around the outer edge and feathering towards the centre where I can. I then carefully layer over the centre of the eye with Irial Yellow. You can then paint on a pupil if you'd like, but I've opted not to. At this point I also finished any claws that I skipped so I could be messy, just using the same black to red scheme that I did on the bigger scythes. And I'll now glue the arms onto the body. The new Termagants are push fit, so you can just push them together and call it good. I personally cut the peg off the arm that's got the Carapace chunk on it and stick it on with plastic glue, smoothing out the Carapace with sprue glue ready for the next step. There's less chance of gaps this way, and I don't want to risk rubbing the paint off when I'm pushing the pieces together. The next main area is that dark purple Carapace, which I start by blocking in with black paint. Take your time when doing this, as overspill can be a pain to fix, though if you do, just want to touch up with your previous colours. The next step is optional. Like the claws and hooves, I put on a quick glaze of Naggaroth Night towards the back edge of the Carapace plates. The idea here is to make it look like a dark purple without just layering it entirely. It gives it a look of having a little sheen of colour. When that's dry, I then draw striations across the Carapace with Xurius Purple, and again but smaller with Genestealer Purple, and a couple dots on the sharpest spots with Slaanesh Grey. Striations are arguably the hardest part about the scheme, and they take a steady hand to draw on. If you want to try, draw with your brush in the most comfortable way to you. For me that's top to bottom, and make sure you're as sturdy as you can. Plant yourself on your desk and steady one hand with the other. It takes a little bit of practice, but you start to get the hang of it after a few tries. Having a fine tipped brush is also very helpful, as you can imagine. My Leviathan scheme uses the Splinter Fleet tradition of Carapace patterns, so by all means skip the step if you're happy with the purple as it is. My Termagants all have just a single yellow stripe down the centre from head to tail, so I map that on first with Chikara Orange. This is relayered entirely with Trollslayer Orange to boost the colour, before putting on a couple glazes of Irial Yellow and Flashgitz Yellow. A last highlight with Moonstone goes on after that. Lastly, the smallest details. Firstly, the eyes, which I went over earlier on the flesh borer. I blocked the eyeballs in with Avalanche Sunset using a small brush and a bit of patience to try and not overspill, then relayered with Iriel Yellow. If you overspill, you can flood a little Druchii Violet into the socket to help hide that mistake. Again, feel free to draw your pupils in, but I don't. And for the teeth, I start with an all-over coat of Rakarth flesh. They're then washed with Agrax Earthshade before being relayered with Pallid Witch flesh. As a final step, I'll then do any special effects, like Yuhu glue in the mouth for drool, or on some of them I use clear thread for stronger strings. And with that, that's how I paint my Termagants. By cutting some steps, like the glazing, or changing out the techniques used, you can speed up the process for big batch painting jobs. Dry brushing works in place of a lot of what I did here, for example. I think I'll always just paint like this, but that doesn't mean everyone watching has to. As said earlier, here's also how the scheme looks with different weapon types. I forgot spine fists were a thing, but trust me, they'll look fine like this too. If you have any questions or I skipped over something too quickly, leave a comment below and I'll get back to you. Thanks again for watching, good luck with your own Termagants, and I'll see you again soon.